All right, just a couple words from me, and then we're going to kick things off. So first of all, thank you so much for making your time to come here. I know everybody's got so much going on, and I know this is a topic that we and you all are particularly passionate about, but it really means a lot that you choose to come out tonight. Of course, I want to say thank you ahead of time to the lovely people of our panel. Jenna and DuBose are paid to be here. Everybody else is not. So extra special thank you to you. And of course, to Frederick and the team at LinkedIn for hosting us. This panel has been in the works for a while. Most of you on it do not know that. But the story of how this came about is sustainability has kind of been at the heart of what we wanted to build with Rival really since day one. And even before day one, we submitted our application to be a B Corp. We signed up for 1% for the planet. We had a lot of conversations on how we can build sustainability into what we do as a business and also how we build the brands. And one of the kind of a community event type things that we do, smaller group dinners, and we actually did one as a breakfast. This was probably, what, 6 months ago? And so Sophie was there, Abba was there, a couple other people, George was there as well. But anyway, it's a small group event where we have conversations about marketing as a group, basically. And they're always very interesting and usually pretty passionate. But this one in particular just went off in a really positive way about the role of marketing in driving the sustainability agenda within businesses and within the wider industry. And I remember talking to Vera, and I think as we were walking out, saying there is something to that conversation. How do we bring it to a wider group of people? And so it took us 6 months to kind of get our stuff and also get our budgets together to be able to do this. But I'm really excited to hear the conversation tonight and hear everybody's contribution to it. I think we've got roughly an hour budgeted for the content. We're going to have some time for questions at the end. And I think that's it. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to DuBose, who's going to moderate, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Eric. I thought the story of how this panel came together was going to be about an hour long, but luckily we have some time for the panel, so that's good. So generally, we'll jump straight in a few moments, but first we'll just do introductions for myself and everyone who was gracious enough to be here tonight. My name is DuBose Cole. I'm one of the other co-founders here at Rival. My background is kind of brand strategy and creative strategy, so I tend to look at an issue like sustainability from that point of view, and I'm intrigued to kind of contrast it and hear everyone else's point of views on the issue tonight. Why don't we start over here with Abba?
Hey, yeah, the breakfast was cool, by the way, and delicious. So I work for a business called Circa 5000, and the reason why I really care about sustainability and marketing is what we do is it's called impact investing. So it's putting your savings in businesses that are genuinely changing the world and saving the world. So if I didn't care about marketing, sustainable marketing, I'd be doing a really, really bad job.
Great. My name's Lena Roland. I'm head of content for WARC strategy. WARC used to be known as World Advertising Research Centre. We exist to help marketers be more effective, and we work with brands globally around the world and agencies, media owners, and one of our roles there is to put the spotlight on priority topics, one of which, of course, is sustainability and how those two worlds collide and how we can come together to help solve the challenges we face.
Hi, I'm Sophie Collins, CMO at MPB, which I guess is most people here don't know what it is. We are the world's largest platform to buy, sell and trade photo and video gear. So maybe the videographer knows. We are the second largest platform for circular marketplace platform in the UK after Music Magpie. Next year, actually, I think we'll probably overtake them. So it's a really big business and we're global. And actually, we're a sustainable business. Anyway, our business model is we recirculate kit, 500,000 photo and video pieces a year. And the VP of Sustainability reports into me as CMO, which I think is a really interesting one, and hence the breakfast kind of went off Abba apparently. I think that might be nice. Because I personally think that marketing has a massive role to play in driving sustainability, and so for me it's really exciting to have sustainability report into my function.
I wasn't at the breakfast, so I missed out on this on the bacon rolls and the chat. My name is Benedict Kingsmill. I lead the financial services vertical here at LinkedIn, working with a huge variety of global financial services brands. One of the things that we have as LinkedIn is access to a huge treasure trove of data. We have approximately 960 million members around the world. And if you think we have immediate visibility of when they've moved jobs or when they're looking for jobs, or so in terms of a global workplace, we have a real snapshot. And when that comes to sustainability, it means that we can draw on that data to see where gaps are, see the kinds of jobs that are coming up, those sorts of things. So I'm really looking forward to drawing some of that into this conversation.
And I'm Jenna. I'm the non-bearded co-founder of Rival. My background is mostly agencies. For those of you who are familiar with the space, I'm ex-Jellyfish, ex-Essence, VaynerMedia, where I met Eric and DuBose. My interest in this has come around from I spent years as a media buyer, spent probably like a little over $500 million in paid media. Examples at holding companies and big independents, and came from the perspective of spent many years having to do what I felt was a bunch of stupid bullshit in like the way that I had to structure my ad buys that were completely wasted. And so came to this from the perspective of like, oh my gosh, the amount of human time and effort and intelligence that's wasted on stuff that doesn't actually go anywhere, those stats that we had on earlier, and that frankly it should be better, both from a human perspective and I would like for us to have a planet in the next 10 to 15 years. And so that's where my interest in this came about.
Well, perfect. I wasn't at the breakfast, nor did I even know there was a breakfast, so this is incredibly awkward. But I can move past that. I think what I'd love to start with tonight, and Jenna, I'll go to you first to open it up, and then I'd love just for everyone to chip in as starts, is yeah, I think it's interesting, sustainability. In marketing, it's one of those broad terms we all talk about, but we all have a slightly different meaning when we think about it. I used to have a creative director that called it a suitcase word. You can put whatever meaning you like in it, but it's very hard to find a consensus. And I think it's also very hard to find a consensus on how consumers and customers are responding to it. It's very easy just to go, everyone deeply cares about sustainability, but we all know that everyone with all emotional topics responds in a very individual way to these types of things. So I'd love to draw upon the broad experience of the panel here to talk about what are you seeing from your customers or your consumers when it comes to sustainability? Where is it trending towards? What are we seing?
Yeah, so I'm going to add my perspective because we had this conversation about, hey, what should we talk about on this panel? And my contribution was, if anybody wants a really good meme account page to follow, go check out Digital Chadvertising on Instagram. It's really fun, very enjoyable. Not only for the memes, which are excellent, but also because it's really followed by a lot of other like industry professionals. You frankly just get a lot of gossip in there about like, oh, so and so is doing layoffs, or like what's happening at like really this big agency group. Like I think they have several tens of thousands of followers of folks in the agency world. And a little while ago, a couple months ago, like they posted about WPP's sustainability efforts, that like WPP is like seeking to decarbonize their media. I know that like Essence MediaCom now has gotten kind of a lot of attention for some of the things that they're trying to do in this angle. And one of the things that kind of got featured a lot on this new page was a lot of rank and file agency members writing in and going, I don't fucking care about this. Why does this matter to me? This is making my life more difficult. Advertising is absolutely nothing compared to the emissions of the beef industry. Why am I being forced to like do all these things? This is all completely performative. What's the point of all this? And so, obviously, like we have clients and a couple other things, but my perspective, like I say, is mostly in media buyers and people who are engaged essentially in paid media and the media supply chain. And I am not seeing like a huge push for sustainability, partially because a lot of people don't necessarily know that like the electricity used to power their data transference, like of their ad campaigns, or again, like the difficulties in programmatic supply chains and all these other things are actual like emissions. And so I think the big thing, the biggest challenge that I'm seeing is that like people do not yet have a conception of sustainability as a related topic to how we do business in the world of media buying. I'm starting to see it a little bit. Like I say, I think Essence kind of does deserve a little bit of a shout out for being one of the biggest like holding group agencies that's starting to make moves in this. But I haven't seen a lot of folks like in my sphere really start to treat this as a serious issue, even at or that like this is only a creative matter. This is only related to the products that we have to deal with, rather than it being kind of a core business reality for how every single sector of marketing in the economy needs to do business. So that's kind of been my experience with the sustainability conversation in my part of the world.
Would anyone like to build on that? What does everyone think of that?
I mean, I can take it maybe from the other side of things. So Essence at MediaCom actually are our agency. We selected them 2 years ago in a competitive pitch because of their sustainability creds. And if people couldn't answer our sustainability questions as part of the RFP, we just didn't continue with them. And so we've worked really hard with them, and we're really happy with how we're moving along with decarbonising our media. And media, we discovered this year for the first time, is actually the biggest carbon emission in our business. Bear in mind, our business globally is 3 huge warehouses, couriers, shipping, cameras and lenses out and back all over the place. My assumption was actually couriers would be higher, and it's not. It's our digital media plan. So it's become a really big focus for us. And I think they've done a really good job actually with us. But I have to say, I think they would probably say that their clients aren't clamoring to take up that part of their service. So I think it's actually, I think it's on the brand side to start pushing their agencies more. And the agencies, so I think EMX, frankly, are probably too big to be looking after our kind of size account, but I think they're doing it because then we can test that product that they're selling, right? And then they can take it to other clients. But I would like to think that there was more on the client side that was pushing agencies to do it. And then I think probably there's some reluctance, right? The media buyers are all, I used to be a media buyer years ago, like everybody's overworked and nobody ever has enough time or budget to be able to do everything they'd like to do, with clients increasingly demanding in an economic downturn. So to say on top of that, now not only do you have to do your plan, but you have to reduce carbon whilst you're doing it, but don't impact performance. And by the way, the budget's being slashed is a pretty bad ask. So I don't have a solution.
I think, by the way, that's just to focus in on that. That's astonishing that sort of data point that is the largest carbon, and I think the response, when you think in terms of a kind of talent brand and the response that you described before, you've got this kind of conflict. There's this unspoken kind of reality, and the awareness just doesn't exist. And the irony being, a team of communications professionals, passionate about this topic, it seems that there's that huge knowledge gap.
I'm not sure that's true though, because ultimately media buying and marketing planning follows consumer consumption, right? So we go where the eyeballs are, right? So you can fight your board about being as green as you want, but if everyone's watching TikTok, that's where they're going to want to be.
Well, how did you handle that? If it once you made this discovery, how have you handled that?
I mean, I don't have that problem. I have a very supportive board and a supportive exec team, which makes a massive difference to how much I can drive sustainability, and it makes me feel really privileged and also slightly terrified about whatever my next job might be. So we have had to make decisions. So we have reduced some of our media plans in order to reduce wastage, but it's all been with performance as a consideration, right? So we removed the bottom 15% in terms of carbon emissions from our plan and actually reinvested that same budget into those people who had better carbon emissions or who were willing to tell us about carbon emissions. And we saw actually, I can't remember the numbers, of more than 15% uplift in performance. So that's a great story to tell. But that was on one campaign, and now we need to go, okay, well, how do we scale that across everything? Because to make any kind of dent in the numbers, and it's literally 1.5 times what our couriers are. So as a, we ship the most camera equipment in the world, and that's 1.5 times the couriers. So in order to do that, we obviously can't stop. We obviously can't just do posters. That's not going to fly. So we have to first cut wastage. That's our first position. Second is really think about formats, maybe move away from video and look at how performance is impacted. I think a sustainable business is one that's good for people, planet, and profit, right? Like nobody's sat here imagining that we're working for charities or philanthropic organizations. So we still need to do it with performance at the core. We have just gone into a plan of like, well, let's cut this, test it, see, make sure performance isn't dinged, then move on. And we're just going to have to keep doing it. We're never going to get to zero.
Yeah.
I think a good question for WARC though, isn't it? Which is, we don't have a universal currency of measurement in any form of marketing or advertising. Can we get to a universal form of measurement for carbon emissions?
That is a big question. So look, in the media space, we've got, I mean, there is no excuse for a lack of education because AdNet Zero launched in this country, at least, in November 2020.
With only two media owners behind it, Channel 4 and Google, right?
But it's grown and it's a start. So I think that's the thing as well. We have to, the ripple effect, we have to kind of start and all of that good stuff. So I think there is no excuse for lack of knowledge because it is out there, particularly, as I say, in this market, and AdNet Zero launched in the US earlier this year as well. I think the key point is, yeah, you're absolutely right. We all know that. The brands are going to want to follow the eyeballs. And sometimes, often the eyeballs aren't in carbon-friendly places. But I think, Jenna, you made this point in your piece that you wrote for WARC, that we just need to think about doing less, so reducing wastage and actually getting, we would say at WARC, getting the fundamentals of your advertising right so that you will stand out quicker, you will reach quicker, you won't have to do as much if you get your fundamentals right, if you really know how to brand and if you know how to, whether it's a distinctive asset, you need to do less if you are landing your message better, less often, if that makes sense.
I think it does. And I think you've raised a really interesting point there, especially when we talk about ripple effects. And I think, Sophie, you mentioned it as well earlier on, the impetus of who it is to actually drive this change forward. Because we've talked about consumers, we've talked about marketers, we've talked about media owners. And I think sustainability is one of those interesting issues where you have short-term intention and long-term benefit. And we're wired a lot to focus on what's that short-term intention. Is it profit? Is it saving money if you're a consumer? Whose responsibility is it primarily to push this agenda forward?
So I speak to the youngsters in my team and across the business, just randomly ask them, what's your view of when you're asked to change your behaviour? So maybe be on TikTok less, etc. And they're like really resentful. I'm sure you hear it as well, that they are being asked to correct our problems. It's probably no surprise to people. So it is a lot to ask them to change their behaviour. But I think it's everyone's responsibility is the answer, really. Everyone has to chip in, collaborate rather than compete. We are a real creative industry. We're problem solvers. We're mavericks. We push the needle. We can be radical. I would say we need more radical action and quick. But I think it is everyone's responsibility. Marketers have a role to play, of course, but it's led from the top as well. I think that's no surprise.
I mean, I think to add to that, I agree with you. Consumer understanding, certainly in the research that we do, is really low in this area about what actually matters. Nobody thinks about their phone as an emitter of carbon. We see it in my industry, in finance, where you put your pension, where you put your savings is far more important than whether you drink oat milk or go vegan. Unfortunately, it's the truth of it. And I think part of the problem that's going on is that so many companies are trying to look good rather than be good, that we've lost any ability as consumers to kind of know how to behave and how to be, and it's really problematic. And the best way I can describe it, and maybe you're going to think I'm mad, it's a bit like going to Sainsbury's, Lidl, wherever, robbing £50 worth of goods, £100 worth of goods, and then the police get you, and then you say, I put all the packaging in the bin, in the recycling bin. And that's pretty much what's going on in the world right now. If your pensions are invested in oil and gas, and tragically defence, right now, you are going to be making a lot of money. And I guarantee you that most of you in this room don't actually know where your money is invested. So in many ways, as marketeers, we're asking people to make the easy decisions, the inconsequential decisions to make them feel good, but those decisions are not going to change the world.
So just to jump in on that, I completely agree with the education piece. That's exactly the point that I was making earlier. But is there a commercial? I'm coming back to you because you've got this live example where is there a commercial advantage to MPB? For the way that you're choosing to run the business? Are you seeing a payback from the stance that you're taking? because that, if to your point about follow the money, if there's more and more businesses that are making the right decisions and that important P, the profit, is coming, then surely that is the kind of the opportunity is to create beacons out of those businesses, and ensure that then.
I think the difference is we're a secondary marketplace, so our business model is circular. So whilst we weren't set up for sustainability, we're 12 years old, nobody was talking about sustainability. We're lucky in that the camera industry has great backward compatibility and they have great kit, right? So we have cameras and lenses going around, cameras 10 years old, lenses 25, 50 years old that are still in circulation, and they're still backward compatible. So that's a really fortunate position that most consumer electronics doesn't have. Actually, I sat on a panel with the CMO of giffgaff recently, who also drive their sustainability from the marketing function, which was really interesting. So I think it's not the same as if you don't have a sustainable product and then you're trying to be sustainable. We're lucky, I think, in that we have a circular business. Interesting, we've done some research around why people buy secondhand, and the buy and sell secondhand, actually. And the single biggest factor is financial, right? So they can free up cash, maybe not a huge surprise. But the next two kind of aligned, and this is across all markets pretty much in the world, are sustainable reasons or environmental reasons, it's not the same as sustainability, environmental reasons, and the desire to join a community of a movement of resellers, of people who are into vintage or into secondhand. So it's not the primary driver at all. And anywhere, we never lead with a sustainability message actually for that reason, because anybody who tells you that sustainability is the single biggest reason they make a purchase or a sale is lying.
Yeah, we had, just briefly, we've recently conducted a global piece of research with Greenwich Associates, big research business, and looking into independent financial advisors and also the kind of decision-making process that goes in when choosing funds. And again, the research effect means that declared interest in sustainable investing is huge, and then you translate that into the actual numbers, and there's no way that level of declared interest would translate into into what's actually happening. But crucially for financial services brands across talent brand, corporate brand, and consumer-facing brand, sustainability remains an absolutely crucial topic to address. So we know that from a declared perspective, there is that interest, there is that engagement. It is something that's required. But exactly to Abba's point, what's not happening is that's not necessarily translating into actual meaningful change, and that gap needs to close.
I think you raised such an interesting point. We did some research last year as well, where we were looking at sustainability attitudes in the US and the UK. We found a very similar thing. First off, 60% of people say they've volunteered or donated to charity in the last 6 months, which, if was actually true, would be incredible. But I think it does show the idea that I think we think of ourselves as virtuous, as charitable, as doing things. But then the reality is, I think, Abba, as you've said, people are prone to do just one-off actions. I've done this thing that didn't actually really matter, but I've done my bit. And I think with that backdrop, I think there's an interesting thing that we've uncovered here, that brands are almost seemingly expected to have to deliver a sustainability agenda and a sustainability benefit. But the reality is things like price and other rational functions, a lot of the time will always override that. So you're kind of asked to do a bit of a balancing act. And I'd love to switch gears slightly and kind of move from, I think we've talked about some sustainable businesses that at their heart have a purpose and a sustainability to it. And I know there's probably some marketers here who are thinking, well, if my business isn't oriented like that, I'm facing quite a large challenge. Looking at the news last week, actually, Lego had dialed back trying to make sustainable bricks and moving away from oil-based production for them. And it kind of inspired me. I'd love to get everyone's point of view on the question. For marketers who are listening to this and going, my God, this is really tricky, and I'm expected to do something, but if I screw it up, it's probably worse. What does good sustainable marketing look like nowadays? And is a brand allowed to fuck up? To use the medical term.
This may be an idealistic answer, and I'm expect to be sort of, maybe it sparks it, but when I worked in a business called McCann Erickson, an advertising business, and they had a principle that they kind of put up on the wall and everything came through, which was a truth well told. And if you can be an idealist and say, what does good sustainability marketing look like? Well, it should be a truth well told. You should have a story that is true, that you tell in a meaningful way that connects with people and shifts perceptions. Now, I'm very aware, because we had a brief conversation before we got on the panel, that is kind of fancy land, that if there were these thousands of truths that could be told brilliantly, then we wouldn't be having this issue. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't shoot for the moon. And so my answer to that question is a truth well told.
Also, didn't Balenciaga put a stuffed teddy bear in BDSM gear like a little while ago, and we all forgot about it and moved on? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if they can do that and mess that up, right, like, then we can certainly forgive Lego for being like, oh, sorry, a deeply complicated chemicals and supply chain issue like was fine. You know what I mean? Like, if we forgive Balenciaga the BDSM bear, we can definitely forgive Lego that. Like, especially like because of how hard these things are. Like I'm really struggling with Scope 3, the company, not to be confused with like Scope 3 emissions, but like Scope 3, the company. For those of you that don't know, Scope 3 is essentially supposed to be like a sustainability in like the media and ad chain side of things, where they're trying to report on the emissions of publishers and whatever else in the programmatic supply chain. They just raised $20 million. They've kind of been a big darling of the marketing and advertising industry. Like they're affiliated with McKinsey, all the holding groups, all those other types of things. And I love their measurement API of like, hey, this is what we estimate, all these individual publisher, sites like are emitting based on a reasonably public standard methodology. But one of their biggest products is carbon offsets of your programmatic media buys, of like, hey, you press one click and we swap your programmatic buys to a green media product. Now, on the one hand, I fucking hate that, because like I feel like we were all kind of at the point where it's like we know that carbon like offsets are going into this weird sort of market black hole where there's trading and not actual offsets. On the other hand, I can't really be that mad at these guys, because like they're making an effort and they are doing a lot of really, really great things in the measurement API. So like, all right, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I think that's definitely the case, like from a consumer perspective of like, hey, I shop at the most granola named like cleaning product. It's called Peace with the Wild, is literally the name of this company. It's supposed to be, plastic free and all those other types of things. And occasionally I get products that like have plastic in them. I'm like, oh, I hate this, but you know what? Like we're trying. It's like, that's okay. I think that there is a lot more goodwill and like willingness to accept like, those kinds of like fringe cases than really we understand.
Can we talk offsets for a moment?
And how much we all hate them?
Because offsets are bullshit. And there's great of them. So anyone you see planting a tree, fuck off, basically. It's not going to do anything for 100 years. And what it's going to do is tiny. So carbon offsets for trees are like £30. If you really want a carbon offset, suck it out the sky. That's going to cost you £500 a ton. So the problem is that like with anything, all the people who are supposed to be doing good or posturing to be doing good are buying the cheapest form of good that they can. And you're sitting there thinking as a consumer, well, I've offset this and, that's all right, I've offset my bank account. It's not going to do anything until long, long after you're dead. And also what it's going to do is tiny. And by the way, if it's planting trees, climate change gets any worse. Those trees ain't even going to be alive. Sorry.
Yeah, great.
I think intention matters, right, in all of this, because actually the examples you're giving are brands which are intending to do good, and it's really difficult to always get it right. We have just published a brand copy book where in our short version of our brand copy, it's so short that actually our green, like our claims around our electricity usage become greenwashing if we were to publish it. And like, fortunately, we looked at it and went, that's not right, but that's a brand with sustainability at its core and a VP of sustainability whose job it is to catch these things. But if your intention is good, I think it makes we plant trees. And but it's not the only thing we do. And
we plant trees too.
Yeah.
It's not the only
so I
thing.
don't think it's, I think intention matters a lot in it. And my biggest beef actually with the marketing industry is that most brands are using it as a marketing message, and they're not trying to be accurate, and they're not trying to improve things. And actually, as marketeers, newsflash, we have careers in driving over consumption, which is what's killing the planet. So actually what we need to do ideally is either work in a secondary industry or actually sell less in the brands that we work for. And that's a real difficult message to sell to anybody, isn't it? But that's actually what we need to do. So I think it really, I think the messaging matters and where it came from and whether you're, fashion is a really, really good example of it, right? Almost every fashion brand has had to step back from their eco part of their business. Selfridges runs their second-hand part, this 1% of their business, it's all over their window on Regent Street. It's just nonsense. So for me, that's where I give brands a bit of leeway. You're trying, but you put plastic in it because there's not an alternative on that one thing. I'm okay with that. I'm not okay with Selfridges saying, we're really sustainable. We've got 1% of our revenue from a second-hand clothing bit.
Yeah, I would say I agree with all of that. I think offsetting is a dangerous strategy to rely on. And it can put brands in a risky greenwashing area if they're not careful. It's more of a PR thing, but it is a good intention. I think we absolutely agree with your statement there, Jenna. We've written about WARC. Perfection is the enemy of the good in this space. We can't knock people down and companies down for trying. A 120-year-old legacy brand is not going to be born sustainable. It can't be Patagonia. That is great sustainable marketing because it's from the core of the business, the heart of the business. And we will see more of those. We will see more Patagonias. And obviously the other businesses, legacy businesses, need to stay competitive. They need to pivot quite quickly in order to keep up with that. But I think, perfection is the enemy of the good. We have to let big companies fail. As long as they are genuinely doing good and it is coming from the top and they're trying, they're not going to get it right all the time.
I love that sentiment and the idea that I think it boils down to intention. And we need to recognize that someone's tried and they've genuinely tried in a way that's going to make an impact, not just Charlie Brown with the environmental football. Then I think that there's an opportunity there. But I guess one thing that struck me when we were talking about this is, what would be your advice individually to a marketer or to someone on the agency side that's trying to enact this? Because it feels like there's a lot of individual risk for a lot of collective benefit. It's very easy to go, it's okay to fail. Perfection is the enemy of the good. But when you're judged on perfection, it's hard to be the one that has to roll that out.
And quarterly sales reports and short-termism.
But there's no evidence between sustainable marketing decisions and lack of performance, right? We've built in wasted into our business models. So if we just take that as a simple principle, reducing wasted, stuff that no one sees or does anything about, how could that be anything other than better?
Yes, but most people don't measure it, right? So we have higher performance on the same budgets with a lower carbon footprint in our media plans in the last 6 months. Yes. So that's good.
That's great.
But that's because we measure it. And actually, I've asked on various CMO WhatsApp groups and stuff, how many people measure it, how many people care, how many people have it talked about in their business, and it's tumbleweed across the board. I think the answer is individually what you can do is educate yourself, because actually I think it's a really difficult topic to understand. And I don't want to be a sustainability expert. I want to be a sustainable marketing expert, right? So you don't want to end up in a world where you could talk about the ins and outs of all sorts of, government policies and things. And it's not there's not an obvious kind of go there and that's where you'll learn everything you need to know. I have a really fortunate position where I have the most knowledgeable person on the topic I've ever met reporting into me. So my response would be phone Rachel, but obviously most people can't do that. So I think educating yourself is the most important. I think honestly, like somebody said earlier, where marketers tend to be quite gobby people, right? Then you have to use your voice and maybe vote with your feet. If you're in an organization who just flat refuses to change, then I think maybe you have to think about another job.
Right, yeah. I think it's been a common theme, the education and awareness, and perhaps it's naive to think that if we knew we would change our behaviour, but you have to assume that not only would you hope that would be the case, but what you've described is it's not just sustainable marketing; it's good marketing. Yeah, that's the point. And if you can, if you can encourage good behaviour that delivers results, that has less wastage, and by the way, has significantly less carbon impact, then you're almost in the why wouldn't you camp? And when you're trying to elicit behaviour change, it's a hell of a lot easier to do that when you're in the why wouldn't you case. So I think the other thread that was there's the knowledge gap and education, but also this kind of measurement piece. And I certainly know, as a consumer of mainstream kind of media, as well as the odd groups and all the rest of it, know that there is no consistency in how measurement is reported, and that turns it into a sketchy subject, turns it into something where claims can be kind of questioned and disproved. And I think that also would be my secondary focus after education. My secondary focus would be nail down this measurement. But that's what, again, my second point from this conversation strikes me, is that there needs to be a regulator with teeth, and I'm not just, we've talked about the FCA, we've talked about these other people coming in from an industry perspective. I'm talking about, a carbon regulator whose role is not industry specific, but is across the board, and that you can put some accountability in,
Yeah, I think, 100%. I am so here for regulatory action on these things, because this is so beyond an individual consumer or any individual organization's ability to deal with this problem. This requires regulatory action. If you are a member of any industry body, if you're in the ANA, if you're a dues paying member of any organizational group, ask them what their fucking lobbying strategy is for. We need a standardized measure of carbon that needs to be handed down from a government body. Related to that, I would check out the Science-Based Targets Initiative. I think that there is some criticism going on right now, essentially about the endorsements that the Science-Based Target Initiatives gives to people's net zero plans. But again, they do have published methodologies on how to measure and assess carbon impacts of reports. That is also, I think, one of the things that I'm the biggest fan of Scope 3, is that they have an API that is available for you to call and say, okay, great, what exactly are going to be the emissions of this particular media plan that I'm doing? So I would definitely check them out for that. But yeah, also again, I think that this has become a regulatory problem. If you work at an organization large enough to have a lobbying department, which many of you probably do, we need these things. I have a Google News alert for the antitrust cases that are going against Google and Meta in the United States, because breaking those folks up, I think, is going to be crucial to we need transparency from those people. If you deal with platforms regularly, ask them to disclose. Google does disclose their emissions, but they only do it in their regulatory filing for shareholders and not on a dynamic basis for their individual placements. The same for Meta. Ask your platform reps for those things. Not to put our friends on LinkedIn at the spot, but we'd love to see that from LinkedIn, right? All those types of things. I think there's a lot of things to be done, but also, again, to start making this a conversation internally of how are we dealing with this? Yeah. It's a talent problem. Nobody is going to be able to hire Gen Z, and I know there's a bunch of folks here from Imperial. I'm going to assume that all of you are looking for jobs and are probably I don't want to go work for a fucking defense contractor, because why the fuck would you? I assume you all want jobs in 30 years on a functioning planet. Couch it as a talent, talent gaining and retention.
It's the trifecta of brand. Each one is as important as the other.
Yeah.
From a corporate responsibility, from a consumer point, and from a talent point.
It's not difficult to solve, though. We have this already available, certainly in the UK, right? Which is, on every single penny you spend on a media buy, you pay a levy, right? It's a very small levy. I think it's 0.01%, which pays for the Advertising Standards Authority and the BACC to regulate our advertising. We fund those bodies as marketeers through our agencies. We pay for those things. If we wanted to, we could do exactly the same for carbon measurement. In the same way that we regulate that our advertising is true and fair, we could pay a small levy on our media spend to make that happen.
Yeah,
we don't.
And the minute that someone makes the commercial argument for that, then you are 99% there, and that's not what's missing. The commercial argument. Yes, we won't have a world.
Yeah,
that's pretty clear.
But stop there, right? Like, we don't need a commercial argument. We need a planet. I have children. I would quite like them to have a planet. I think we have to stop thinking about the commercial benefit of it and start thinking about the planet benefit. And actually, if we have time to just throw something in there, the entire discussion this evening has been environmental sustainability. But actually, true sustainability is not that, right? It's people, planet, and profit. It's also about diversity and equity and inclusion. And there's a whole piece of marketing for that as well. We take it very seriously because we're in visual storytelling, and visual representation really matters in that. So we have all sorts of targets we give ourselves about how we make sure that people's voices are heard from all different walks of life, regardless of which group they are in. And actually, I understand why we end up in a carbon discussion every time, but I would really love for us to talk about sustainability in the truest sense of the word, and being a truly sustainable business inside and to, what we're offering and how we're communicating to our audiences.
I think just when you asked the question, it's a good question to both generate some good discussion. The thing that I thought first off was just to be braver, to challenge more, and to just be future fit. You shouldn't need a commercial benefit. The reality is that does move the needle, but there are ways we are storytellers. There are ways that we can say there is. The obvious one is we need a planet. We need people to buy stuff on a planet that's still here. But it's also it's just about, there are legal requirements. Okay, so that you have to not break the law. There are reputation. There's more. Marketing is more than your 30-second TV or TikTok ad, but it's actually how you show up, your brand equity, your reputation. It's future-proofing your business, and it's also staying competitive. It is the direction of travel. This isn't going away. This problem will not be solved. You be a leader, not a laggard. All of that is very persuasive for brands and marketers. They just need to be on it, and many of them are. So many of them are. I feel optimistic. I speak to small and big brands, and they are doing really good work and trying. Not all of them are publicising it because they're afraid to, which makes sense, which is a shame because we want to collaborate. We need to communicate and collaborate and share best practice, but we can learn from what's already out there. But I think it's not easy. It's a quarterly reporting world. But this is myopic. The time for myopia is over. We cannot stay in this zone because I think this month we've surpassed the 1.5% temperature in the number of consecutive days this month, and it's radical change is required.
I think that I feel that this is the first year, and so you and I were talking about this before we did this, where I'm optimistic. I think that we are going to be okay. I think it's going to get a little worse before it gets better. But human beings split the fucking atom. We left the solar system. We will figure this out. And I think that this was the first year where I feel that the needle is tipped, that the psychological distance between the effects of climate change as in the future versus now and impacting my life has tipped for, I think, maybe the barest majority, but a majority of people. And that Brooklyn is underwater. Do you know how many decision makers for major brands live in Brooklyn? Half of them. I think that distance is closed. And so while it is still really scary, I feel that there is more momentum on this as an incorporated topic in core business now than at least I've seen in my career.
As goes Williamsburg, goes the world. So that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'll just say one more thing as well. I think it has to be at the point of brief. There has to be a sustainability conversation at the point of brief. So we're all about how brands grow, but we have to start thinking about how we grow sustainably. And that has to be a discussion at the moment of truth when you're briefing. And it isn't at the moment, and that needs to change. Similarly with DEI considerations as well, as you point out.
I think to that point, I'm conscious of time. Do we have time for one more question? I think one of the things that's come through here, I'd love to get the panel's viewpoint on, is I think there's a theme that I've heard tonight on the idea of tackling sustainability as more of an emotional driver. When we talk about wanting a planet for our children, when we talk about certain bits of sustainability because they're more emotionally charged. Versus, I think we've also talked about how sometimes it can be effectively reframed. So it's more effective as a commercial issue, as a supply chain issue, as a DE&I issue. Those are slightly different approaches to it. One is much more the world is on fire, we have to put it out, calling upon kind of everything from a sense of self-preservation to a sense of doing the right thing. And the other is a much more of a rational argument. It's good business, so we would do it anyway. What's the route that we should take? Because I think those are slightly different.
A blend of both. It's like most things in our world, long, short. I would say distinctive, different. Like most things, it's a blend of both. I think it has to be emotionally driven, and the business case for it. You shouldn't need a business case for such things, but it's more persuasive if there is a route to growth via sustainability.
Creatively, no one's interested in the world is on fire, right? We might watch a horror movie once a month or even never, in my case, but most of us are drawn to nostalgia, happiness, family, belonging, laughter, even. And that is what, as marketeers, we've been really, really crap at. We tell people that the world is on fire, and all that tells people is, oh my God, it's all gone terribly wrong. Do nothing. Do nothing.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a kind of new creative challenge definitely in marketing, which is how do you make something essentially doom-worthy, positive and interesting and happy and hopeful. And I don't think we've seen many good examples of that yet.
Yeah, apparently humour works. Which makes sense. You know, we all like a laugh, even in dire situations. But there's been several research pieces that have shown that humour does work. I think System 1 shown it, and a few more. But there's key messaging is important, and humour shouldn't be overlooked in dire.
I think it's a stretch to connect it, right? Don't buy a camera because the world's on fire. That would be a very difficult creative execution for me. but
I need to get the picture.
Well, I mean, we do, right? We sponsor lots of environmental photography things for that reason, because a visual representation of what's happening to the planet is very powerful. But actually what we're trying to do is drive people to sell, because the circular economy only works if people are selling, right? Everybody buys on Vinted, well done, but also please sell on Vinted. That's a much better thing for the planet and for sustainability. So we're trying to drive consumer behavior to sell, and that's a really big part of our messaging. We never say because the planet's on fire. I do go home and think it, but we don't say it. And I think that's the thing. There's very few brands that actually are going to stop the planet being on fire. It's all of us collectively being a bit better will make the world a better place. I don't doubt marketers, and most people, frankly, are nice people, but I do think actually as a collective, we're clueless. And I think actually people have got a responsibility to educate themselves.
Yeah, I agree.
There's an industry that's responsible for also helping us to be educated. I mean, everybody needs to do something differently when they leave this room. And I think actually when I look around the marketers that I come across, maybe a few hundred people every year that I speak to in one way or another, no one is thinking about it. No one understands it. If I say, do you care about sustainability? They go, well, somebody did talk to me about carbon offsets. I mean, it's such a completely woeful area. And actually, maybe in the last 30 years as marketers, we haven't had to re-educate ourselves on anything huge. And this is something we have to re-educate ourselves on. It's huge. It's not easy because there isn't anything out there where I could say, go there, sign up to their course, whatever.
I checked this morning and we have 40 courses on LinkedIn Learning specifically dedicated to sustainability.
What's the carbon footprint if we take it?
Well, I need to get your API.
And we do have a sustainability hub at WARC, so it is a good place to start.
But I love that. I mean, you're right, but we should look at that. It's just like the choice of chairs. You know, we should look at that.
Mine is radical optimism. Be fucking hyped in the room about what an opportunity this is, because like honestly, okay, yeah, the world is on fire, and like, oh my god, that's existentially horrifying. Like that's like environment, like the scream constantly like going on in my head all the fucking time. Absolutely terrifying. However, humans are incredible for their ability to ring fence those things and continue on about their day. And I like, again, I think it's going to be fucking miserable for a little while, but then I think we are going to get there. And like, what an opportunity. What an opportunity. Oh my God. Like, do you know how rare it is to actually get to truthfully pitch people on, I will cut your budget and do better, like with like a sustainability, you will see like better performance. That is like snake oil levels of like performance promise. It is a legitimate opportunity, like with these things. It's the same, like again, like the, hey, you can be a leader, like not a follower. Again, like if you can, and because it is just a base reality of 50 years in the future, assuming we all get our shit together and we all go through this, the societal Herculean effort to get us to a better place, there will be no businesses that are not sustainable at their core. And in order to do that, you're going to have to do all this stuff. And like sell people on the vision of flying cars in the future, like the marketing version of the Jetsons, because like that's fun and people like want to get like behind that. And again, being able to be like, oh my gosh, if you're Unilever, don't you want to eat P&G's fucking lunch? Like P&G's supply chain is garbage. Unilever should be crushing them on this. Take Ben & Jerry's as like a test case and be like, all right, we're going to run your Ben & Jerry's media the way that it should be run. And then let's do this for all of Unilever. I think, like I said, like especially, and I'm sorry to the Imperial kids, I realize that you're all sitting over there. I'm not trying to put all of this responsibility on you, but when you all go get jobs, be radically optimistic and like talk about like what a fucking wild opportunity this is. I don't know if anybody knows James Acaster, like the British like comedian. Like he tells this joke about like how well he knows his audience, and he makes it. And I know that you'd all kill for a fresh start in life is like the joke that he tells. Every single brand is about to have the opportunity to have a brand new fresh start in life. If like you have legacy tech problems of like, I fucking hate our MarTech stack because none of it works together or all this other shit. Oh my God, amazing. Let's fucking fix it for you and like make it sustainable, right? Like we don't let our customers hate this thing. Oh my God, we have an excuse to completely reinvent this like from scratch. Some of this is a little bit of salesmanship, and probably this involves like maybe like overselling some of these things, but you know what, fuck it, like the oil companies are doing worse, so whatever, that's fine. I absolutely 100% think that this is just like unbridled optimism, like that photo of those people playing golf in the California wildfires while the hill is on fire behind them. Play the best fucking round of golf of your life, and like I said, like get people on board with like what an amazing opportunity this is. Despite the existential crushing horror that we all feel on a regular basis. Yeah.
Can I say one thing? Can we not have AI as the answer to all the things you just described without somebody understanding the carbon footprint of AI?
100%, absolutely. AI, absolutely not the answer.
It's taken this long.
500 milliliters of water for every 20 questions.
Yeah. So
it's made it through an entire panel without AI.
I can't believe
the last moment.
I sat through a really interesting conversation recently where we were talking about the carbon of photo shoots and sending people to a shoot for an advertising shoot. And don't worry, we're not going to do them anymore. So we won't be flying our production team overseas. We're just going to use AI. And I couldn't fathom how that would be an okay, don't worry, without any understanding of whether or not that would be worse. I mean, I think it would be very many times worse, but I actually don't know the numbers. But I would never wander into the conversation assuming that I knew that that was better. And don't worry, I've taken aeroplanes out of my plans.
It's genuinely 500 milliliters of water just to call the servers for every 20 questions. So that tells you an awful lot about all the other stuff that's going on.
Radical optimism, yes.
I think we'll have to end it on radical optimism. I think if we move from climate change, the robots are also going to kill us. I think it might be here for a while. So I thank you, everyone. It's been an amazingly interesting discussion. I think we managed to get all the way from supply chain to Balenciaga bondage bears. So I think it was a broad range.
And we forgave them. We forgave them. You know?
There you go. So I can't really top that. Thanks, everyone. And let's get back to, I guess, just discussing this.
We're taking audience questions?
Are we taking questions or are we?
Time for two.
Okay, we have time for 2 questions. Does anyone have a question for our panel? Yes?
Patagonia was cited in the audience. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts on who's doing this well and what you like about what they're doing.
Would anyone care to?
I'm going to use a US one. And actually, I don't know. I feel like maybe this is cheating again because they are kind of one of these new businesses, but they're called Grove Collaborative in the United States. And they're plastic-free, like home supplies and kind of whatever else. They are like a membership and subscription club, but they're, like I say, supposed to be entirely like eco-friendly, like cleaning products like for your house and like personal care and all those other types of things. They have, I think, all the best aspects that we would tell our clients to get purely from a performance perspective. They have an incredible e-commerce experience. They're very good about like kind of like their customer engagement and like their email flows and like touch points and all these things. They have all the best hallmarks of what we would say is a best-in-class marketing machine, but their core business, I think, is very, very sustainable. They do great like packaging, again, of like their branding, like on their own packaging for these types of things. So Grove Collaborative in the United States is the one for me that I really wish we had them in the UK, because I like Peace with the Wild, but like their e-com experience is like kind of like going to like a bulk foods like store in like the 90s, where it was like Whole Foods did better because Whole Foods had a better retail experience. I feel like I'm buying out of like a bulk bin, like steel cut oats when I go to Peace with the Wild, and Grove Collaborative was pre-Amazon Whole Foods.
I mean, Peace with the Wild is one word off a haiku. So
yeah, I really like them and I want to support them, but I'm like, I really want to reach out to them. And I think it would be very offensive if I said, can I please help you with your store, please? It'd be really rude. It'd be really rude.
I think the fact that we can't readily come up with an example is pretty damning, I have to say. And I think
there are a few really good examples. Finisterre is another amazing brand who's kind of revolutionizing action sports from a fundamental perspective, like changing what wetsuits are actually made out of. The Swedish brand Poland Opera, if you go visit their website, their secondhand store is now as visible as their first-hand store. So you can literally package your clothes up when your kid is 5 and has grown to 6, send it off to them, and then you get a voucher to then spend again, which you can spend equally in the new store or the old store. So there are a lot of fashion brands that are doing it, starting to do it well, but not necessarily the big ones.
No, and I would challenge a lot. I think there are some really lovely examples, but I mean, the fact that we can't come up with a ready one that everybody in the room would have heard of is really damning.
No.
And also doing this, like your question was, who's doing this well, but this is loads, right? We don't know whether they're measuring their carbon and reducing it in their media. We don't know. We can see their messaging, obviously, because that's external. We don't know what their sustainability is in terms of DEI on their leadership team. There's an awful lot to it.
If you read their board report, you'd be able to see all of that kind of stuff. I do know for a fact, though, that last week there's a big sustainable conference called the Blue Earth Summit in Bristol, and ASOS's head of sustainability went on stage and started to talk about some of the stuff that they were doing, and bless her, she was absolutely torn to shreds, because whatever sustainable efforts they are making are entirely outweighed by the badness that they're doing in the world. So to the point of tolerating attempts at goodness, I think there's less tolerance for that in the world right now versus more fundamental changes to business models.
I think picking up on Jenna's spirit, I think there's a lot that's starting to happen, and there's a lot of positive intention, and there's a lot of movement in the right direction. But I think it is very telling that we can't point to a Unilever or a big consumer brand and say, you know what, they have a truth well told. It's not running all the way through.
There's a company that has been brought to my attention. We haven't got the case study on WARC, but it's a company called Media One. It's a hotel business in Dubai, actually. Never been there, but they describe themselves as not only a hotel chain, but they're tree huggers. So they claim that sustainability.
Dubai.
Is that their call? That's a bit odd, but I want to find out more about them because it sounds to me like they are the new breed coming forward. So they're like, don't ask for your towels to be washed all the time, or they partner with a company called Waste Lab to reduce food waste. So they're growing sustainability through partnerships, again, to the point of collaborating. We're not going to solve it on our own. We collaborate with the smartest people in the space that are moving the needle. So I think that's an interesting case study to watch. I'd like to learn more about them and how they're partnering for that message and driving that agenda.
It's still very niche though. Everything we're saying,
to what their people policy
from surf, wetsuits to Dubai tree huggers, it's niche.
But we've got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of businesses.
Are any of us wearing anything like truly sustainable in the room? Like wearing a pair of Doc Martens, right?
Birds.
They're not sustainable shoes. They're sustainable in the sense that they're probably going to last me.
Who's that? Veha.
The point, perfection is the enemy of the good. And
that's a big problem. We're thinking about, is that not leather and therefore it's not sustainable? So lots of fashion brands and products absolutely went down to quality because to feed the scorecard on sustainability, they're not resellable anymore because they won't last you. Where some of the silk, leather, whatever food could be truly sustainable because they last you for 50 years and more. So that the mental patterns that we are forcing it, have we ever measured the retention on the people's and the talent pool?
Yeah.
How much time and efforts and money we're spending to recurring people? I'm not even touching the DIY agenda. I'm just simple as that. So the problem is also with the KPIs that we're setting ourselves to.
And sorry. No, absolutely. But I think you've encapsulated that brilliantly, because we're talking about, seeking societal behavioural change that from business through to consumers, and yet we can't agree really on what it is, because the complexity wrapped within complexity through a lens of complexity is sustainability.
Because
and so
looking for nice
if I tell someone to put a seatbelt on, I'm telling them to put a seatbelt on. If I tell them to stop smoking, I'm telling them to stop smoking. These are the other examples of major societal behaviour change. If I tell someone to live sustainably, then we're going to have 15 different views.
Don't eat meat. It's not sustainable. Use lots of energy to do processed food.
Your point about KPIs is key, though. I think that has to be back to that point of bringing it into the brief. What are we measuring, and what does good look like, and what does effective marketing look like in 2024 and beyond?
So I'm conscious of time. Sorry to stop the kind of conversation on this. I think we've got time for one more very short question. I'll go to the person in the back who's been quietly waiting. Apologies for everyone I couldn't call on. Yes?
I think the KPIs point is really cool. I remember at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about like people lying in bed, like scrolling on TikTok and things. And that kind of the onus being on the consumer for how much emissions they're burning. I guess as marketeers or people running agencies that are focused on marketing, do you think that you can, I think regulation is like a big problem, there's nothing really holding you to account, if I'm being honest. But I think this conversation is really, really insightful and we all care about it. Do you think that in marketing, there is a role that marketeers have to assert a sustainability agenda through literally assessing the companies that you want to work with? So do you think that assessing companies and looking at the impacts that they're making right now versus the impact that they'll be making in the future is really important? Because actually I feel like I'm guilty of scrolling online before I go to sleep, but really should the onus be on me to educate myself, or should it be on the companies who are putting targets on you to say I want growth of X rate, whatever, through a certain amount of time. So you're going to need to like help them produce content and keep doing that, producing daily content. That then means that I've got so much to scroll through. If I had less to scroll through, I probably wouldn't sit there at night doing it. It'd probably be really boring, right? But is the onus not on the companies that you work with, and then further back to you to like choose who you want?
You hit on the nub of the problem, which is Everybody in business is in the business of growth. So we're going to TikTok. Are TikTok going to tell you to watch less TikTok? No. Right? So it's for all the radical optimism in the world, we have to reframe our view on growth. As we talk about D, E, and I, rather than just about the environment, reality is for everyone to get paid the same, some people have to get paid less. That is not a thing that is tolerable in society right now. So actually, if we're really gonna change the world, we have to rethink that word growth. Because yeah, sure, TikTok should give you a 30-minute lockout. You should say after 30 minutes you can't watch any more TikTok. They are never going to do that.
I think everybody has to do it, right? We can't say that this is not my fault as a consumer and it's not somebody else's fault as a business. I completely agree. Growth is a problem. Sustainable growth, i.e. good for people, planet and profit. So we grow 40%, 50% in previous years, a year at MPB and have done for a decade. So it is possible to be a sustainable business with growth. You just have to accept, actually, we have to move away from commercial targets. That's the problem, right? Is TikTok's never going to say don't do it because TikTok want money for their shareholders. And I cannot get my head around the idea that those shareholders, presumably some of them will have children. I can't get around the idea that they want to buy a bigger house, but they don't give a shit if their children haven't got a planet to live on. It blows my mind, but that is the truth. And I think, look at GambleAware, right? The gambling companies have all signed up to an advertising campaign on GambleAware, where the reality is the only way they make money is if people have a problem. They don't make money from casual gamblers. So they don't want it to be a successful marketing campaign, but they have all signed up to it. And it's exactly the same, right? TikTok can give you a lockout, but they will do it in a way that makes sure that they still get the money that they need. And I just don't understand it. Maybe somebody else does. Like, we don't have a planet to live on, but there'll be lots of rich dead people.
Well, so the point you're making, which is a really tough one, but what you're saying, it seems, is that sustainability is incompatible with capitalism. The big takeaway: education is the first point, appropriate agreement on measurement, and regulation with teeth. And that, from my take out from this conversation, is those three actions are what's required.
I think that's a really logical and good point, I think, for us to draw this to a close. Sorry to stop the conversation. I think, it's interesting what you mentioned there about rational behavior and expecting people to act in their own best interest. I remember there was a great quote about zombie movies and COVID, where after looking at behaviors during COVID, someone said they can understand why someone would be bitten by a zombie and then hide it. It's down to the idea that up until then, it seemed slightly less rational. And I think, there is that. I think it's an amazing point to end on, that obviously education, regulation, and figuring out how we frame this are going to be a lot of the forces that shape this. I will draw it to a close there and just say thanks to everyone on the panel. This has been an amazing discussion. And thanks to everyone out here for sticking around and asking such thought-provoking questions. So thanks, everyone.